In 2011, a former NFL player named Dave Duerson sat alone in his home and made a decision. He picked up a gun, aimed it at his chest, not his head, and pulled the trigger. He left a note asking that his brain be donated to science. He wanted them to see what football had done to him. And when researchers examined his brain tissue, they found something the NFL had been denying for 20 years. But that discovery is not what the league was most afraid of. What terrified them was the paper trail, the internal memos, the exposed playbook of how one of the most powerful organizations in America systematically buried evidence, silenced victims, and protected billions of dollars at any cost. This video contains 10 secrets the NFL never wanted you to know, and by the time we reach number 1, you will understand why they fought so hard to keep all of this in the dark. Let us start with something most fans have never even heard about. Number 10, the drug pipeline that turned players into addicts. In 2017, DEA agents executed raids on multiple NFL team facilities, not for steroids, not for performance enhancers, for painkillers. Vicodin, Percocet, Toradol, controlled substances that were being distributed to players without proper prescriptions, without medical oversight, and in some cases without players even knowing what they were swallowing. Former offensive lineman Jeremy Newberry testified under oath that he was given hundreds of pills over his career, no documentation, no warnings, just a hand reaching into his locker after games with whatever he needed to mask the pain. The NFL's defense was predictable. Team doctors acting independently, isolated incidents, no systemic problem. But court documents told a different story. Teams were moving controlled substances across state lines without proper DEA registration. Medical records were incomplete or missing entirely. Players were given injections in locker rooms by trainers who were not licensed to administer them. And here's the part that matters. When former players tried to sue, the league argued that the statute of limitations had expired. They ran out the clock on accountability while the men who built this sport spiraled into addiction. This was not medical care. This was maintenance. Keep the product on the field. Worry about the consequences later. But the painkiller scandal was just the beginning, because what the NFL did with pharmaceuticals, they perfected with something far more valuable: information. Number 9, the 660,000 emails nobody is allowed to read. When Jon Gruden resigned from the Las Vegas Raiders in October 2021, the headlines focused on his racist and homophobic language in leaked emails. What most people missed was the source of those emails. They came from an investigation into the Washington Commanders, an investigation that reviewed 660,000 emails over a 2-year period. The NFL examined communications from team executives, league officials, and ownership across the organization, and out of all those emails, only Jon Gruden's were leaked. Think about that math for a second. 660,000 emails, one man exposed, everyone else protected. Congress demanded access to the full findings. The NFL refused. They claimed executive privilege. They argued that releasing the investigation would compromise ongoing legal matters. They produced a verbal report only, no written findings, no paper trail, nothing that could be subpoenaed. Multiple sources reported that Commanders owner Dan Snyder possessed information about other owners, information so damaging that the 31 other billionaires in the room were afraid to force him out. When Snyder eventually sold the team in 2023, the terms included confidentiality provisions that will never expire. What was in those emails? Who else said things as bad or worse than Gruden? What did ownership know about the toxic culture in Washington, and when did they know it? Those answers exist. The NFL has them, and they made sure we will never see them. But here's where the story takes a turn, because burying emails is one thing, burying violence is something else entirely. Number 8, the bounty system that everyone knew about. In 2012, the NFL suspended New Orleans Saints head coach Sean Payton for the entire season. Defensive coordinator Greg Williams was suspended indefinitely. The crime was running a bounty program where players received cash payments for injuring opponents. Knock someone out of the game, earn a bonus. End a career, earn more.
The league came down hard. The message was clear. This would not be tolerated.
But former players started talking, not on the record, not to journalists, to each other. And what they said painted a very different picture. The Saints were not special. They were just careless. Bounty systems existed across the league in various forms. Defensive meetings where specific players were targeted, cash pools for big hits, a culture that celebrated violence beyond what the game required. Former linebacker Bart Scott admitted in interviews that bounty talk was common throughout his career. Former safety Ryan Clark discussed how targeting was normalized. These were not fringe voices. These were respected veterans describing something systemic. The NFL made an example of New Orleans and then quietly moved on. No league-wide audit, no comprehensive investigation into other teams, just a convenient scapegoat and a return to business as usual. How many injuries we blamed on bad luck were actually paid for in cash? How many careers ended not from football, but from a transaction that happened before the game even started? The league knows. They have to know. And that brings us to something even darker. Because while the NFL was pretending the bounty system was an isolated incident, they were actively manipulating something far more personal. Number 7. The draft night sabotage they never solved. April 28, 2016. Laramie Tunsil woke up as a projected top 5 pick in the NFL draft. By the end of the night, he had fallen to number 13. That drop cost him somewhere between $8 and $13 million. The reason was a hack. Minutes before the draft began, someone accessed Tunsil's social media and posted a video of him wearing a gas mask attached to a bong. His phone continued to be compromised throughout the night, with additional damaging posts appearing in real time. The FBI investigated. The NFL investigated. Both investigations were closed without any public findings. But here is what most people do not know. That same night, multiple teams reported receiving anonymous tips about other prospects, information designed to tank draft positions, damaging details that surfaced at suspiciously convenient moments. Someone had access to private information about multiple players. Someone knew exactly when to release it for maximum damage. And someone got away with it completely. Who benefits from manipulating draft positions? Agents whose clients move up when others fall? Teams who get better players at lower picks? Gamblers who bet on draft order? The NFL tracked the sources of those anonymous tips. They know who made the calls. They know where the information came from. And they sealed that investigation forever. Young men lost millions of dollars in a single evening. Families had their financial futures altered by a crime that was never solved. And the most powerful sports league on earth decided that justice was less important than closure. This is where we need to talk about something bigger. Because everything I have described so far, the pills, the emails, the bounties, the sabotage, all of it connects to one central truth. The NFL learned decades ago that inconvenient facts can be buried, and they learned it from the biggest cover-up in sports history. Number 6. The brain damage they denied while players died. In 2002, Dr. Bennett Omalu examined the brain of former Pittsburgh Steeler Mike Webster. What he found was damage so severe it resembled an 80-year-old dementia patient. Webster was 50 when he died. Before his death, he had become homeless, confused, and unable to care for himself. Omalu had discovered CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, a degenerative brain disease caused by repeated head trauma. He published his findings and waited for the NFL to respond. They responded by trying to destroy him. The league funded opposing research. They created a committee called the Mild Traumatic Brain Injury Committee, stacked with doctors who had financial ties to teams. They published papers in medical journals questioning Omalu's methodology. They demanded retractions that never came. Internal documents later revealed that league executives had known about the connection between football and brain damage since the 1990s. They knew players were suffering. They knew men were losing their memories, their impulse control, their will to live. And they made a calculated decision. Protect the product, manage the message. Let the players die. Dave Duerson, the man I mentioned at the beginning of this video, shot himself in the chest so his brain could be studied. Junior Seau did the same thing a year later. Both were found to have severe CTE. The NFL eventually settled a class action lawsuit over $1 billion, but even that settlement was designed to protect the league. Payouts were structured over decades. Claims were denied at extraordinary rates. Former players died waiting for money that never came. And here is the part that should keep you awake tonight. The research Omalu started has now examined the brains of over 300 former NFL players. The CTE rate among them is over 99%. 99%. The league knew. They buried it, and men are still dying.
Number 5. The black ball that cost millions and left no fingerprints. In 2016, Colin Kaepernick threw 16 touchdowns against 4 interceptions for the San Francisco 49ers. His quarterback rating was 90.7. He was 29 years old with multiple playoff appearances and a Super Bowl start on his resume. By March 2017, he was unemployed. By 2018, he had filed a collusion grievance against the NFL, alleging that all 32 teams conspired to keep him out of the league. The NFL denied everything. Team executives claimed Kaepernick simply was not good enough. They pointed to his statistics from his final season, ignoring context. They suggested he was a distraction, as if the league had never employed players with far more complicated histories. But in February 2019, the NFL settled the grievance. Terms were confidential, but reports suggested a payout under $10 million. Both sides signed agreements prohibiting them from ever discussing the details. You do not pay someone off if you did nothing wrong. You pay them to make evidence disappear. What did the NFL know about communications between owners? What was said in private meetings when Kaepernick's name came up? What paper trail existed that was damaging enough to warrant a settlement? We will never know. The confidentiality agreement made sure of that. A quarterback went from starting in the NFL to unemployed overnight, and the league made sure the receipts were never seen. Number 4. The referees nobody is allowed to question. In 2007, NBA referee Tim Donaghy went to prison for betting on games he officiated. His case exposed a vulnerability that every professional sports league fears. If the people controlling the game cannot be trusted, nothing else matters. What most people do not know is that Donaghy gave interviews after his release claiming the problem extended far beyond basketball. He specifically mentioned the NFL as having similar issues with officiating integrity. He suggested that gambling among officials was more widespread than anyone admitted. When journalists started investigating, they found troubling patterns. Several former NFL officials had unexplained financial irregularities. Some had connections to known gambling figures. The league conducted internal reviews and found nothing. But here's the question nobody wants to ask. If you are investigating yourself and finding wrongdoing would cost you billions in credibility and legal exposure, how thorough is that investigation going to be? The NFL generates more gambling revenue than any other sport in America. The integrity of officiating is worth more than anyone can calculate. Billions of dollars in bets are placed every single week, all of it based on the assumption that the games are fair. If there was evidence of compromised officials, would the league ever tell us? Or would that be the one secret worth burying at absolutely any cost? Number 3. The owners' meeting tapes that vanished. October 2017. NFL owners gathered for a private meeting to discuss player protests during the national anthem. The meeting was recorded, as all owners' meetings are. But what was said in that room would become the subject of leaks, lawsuits, and extraordinary efforts at concealment. According to sources who were present, the language was ugly. One owner allegedly referred to players as inmates running the prison. Others discussed financial retaliation against protesters. The overall tone treated players not as partners, but as problems to be controlled. When Colin Kaepernick's legal team demanded access to recordings and transcripts of that meeting, the NFL fought back aggressively. They claimed executive privilege. They argued that internal owner discussions were protected from disclosure. The recordings were never released. 32 of the wealthiest people in America sat in a room and discussed how to suppress a player-led civil rights movement. We know fragments of what was said because of leaks, but the full recording, the complete picture of how owners talk about players behind closed doors? Gone, sealed, protected by legal maneuvers that ensure we will never hear the truth. What else was discussed in that room? What other agreements were made? What plans were set in motion that we know nothing about? Those tapes exist somewhere, and the NFL will never let them see the light of day.
Number 2. The cheerleaders they treated like property. For decades, NFL cheerleaders were classified as independent contractors. This meant they were not entitled to minimum wage protections, benefits, or basic workplace standards. Some earned as little as $5 per hour. Others were paid nothing at all for mandatory appearances. But the financial exploitation was just the surface. Former cheerleaders have described being weighed in front of coaches, being required to follow strict rules about their social media, their relationships, even where they could eat in public. Some squads were prohibited from being in the same restaurant as players. Others were required to leave events if a player arrived. They were decorations, props, less valuable than the equipment managers. When women started coming forward with stories of harassment and discrimination, lawsuits were filed and quietly settled. Non-disclosure agreements were signed. The rules were changed just enough to avoid further scrutiny. But what about the decades of mistreatment that happened before anyone paid attention? What about the women who were harassed and could not speak because contracts forbade it? What about the culture that allowed this to happen while the league looked the other way? The NFL fixed the paperwork. They did not fix the accountability. And that brings us to the final secret, the one that connects everything we have talked about, the one that reveals what the NFL really is when nobody is watching. Number 1, the disability claims they fought while players died waiting. When former NFL players became too broken to work, too confused to care for themselves, too damaged to live normal lives, they applied for disability benefits through the league's pension plan. These were men who had given their bodies to football, men who had generated billions in revenue, men who had entertained millions while destroying themselves in the process. The NFL fought their claims with everything they had. The league hired doctors to examine these broken players and declare them fit for work. They denied claims at staggering rates. They dragged out appeals for years, knowing that some players would die before receiving a single dollar. Internal documents revealed that the pension fund had financial incentives to deny claims. Every rejection saved money. Every appeal won meant lower payouts for everyone. These were not statistics. These were human beings. Former players testified about living in cars, about losing their homes, about being unable to remember their own children's names. And while they suffered, the NFL generated $18 billion a year and argued in court that these men were not really disabled. Dave Duerson applied for disability benefits before he died. Junior Seau struggled financially in his final years. Mike Webster spent his last days confused, homeless, and abandoned by the sport that made him famous. The league that calls itself a family spent decades treating former players like liabilities to be minimized. They buried evidence. They silenced critics. They ran out the clock on dying men. And they assumed we would never find out. But secrets have a way of surfacing. Cover-ups crack. The truth finds its way out eventually. Now you know what they never wanted you to learn. You know about the pills and the emails and the bounties. You know about the brain damage they denied and the collusion they settled. You know about the referees and the recordings and the cheerleaders and the disability claims. The question is simple. What do you do with this information? Do you share it with someone who still believes the NFL is just a game? Do you watch next Sunday with different eyes? Do you ask why a league worth $18 billion cannot seem to take care of the men who built it? Every view, every share, every conversation that starts because of this video is a crack in the wall they built to keep this buried. They are counting on you to forget by kickoff. Prove them wrong.